In this video, I'm going to be talking about the signs of wheel bearing failure that I didn't expect. The 2019 6.7 has 215,000 miles on it, and I hadn't replaced the wheel bearings. Up until this week, the wheel bearings were original, so they were about 6 years old. As a maintenance item, I knew that the wheel bearings would be due soon. These, maybe they just weren't that bad yet, but it was actually kind of hard to diagnose. You know, I was expecting like clicking, screeching, and it was a lot more subtle. So this is characteristic of wheel bearings, but humming. And it was interesting because the humming sound I actually thought was the KO3s. I was like, oh, all right, they have 20,000 miles on them, like they're in all-terrain, they're gonna be making a humming sound. But it was a lot louder than I was expecting for a tire that still has like 30 seconds on it. You know, I just kind of ignored that humming sound. And then when I was in New Hampshire a few weeks ago for a work trip, I was driving around and I would notice the truck would be like kind of lurching from time to time. So it would almost be like I was like pushing something, almost like I was plowing snow. And I'd have to give it a lot more revs, and it was like there was some weird resistance in the front end. And so I still had to drive 3,000 miles back to Washington from New Hampshire, and I was like, shit, I should get this checked out. So I took it to a shop, told them what was happening. I was like, I thought the calipers were seized, because the calipers are still original on this thing. And they checked everything out, looked at the brakes, took the wheels off, had it up on a lift, poked around, stomped on the brakes, you know, checked the wheel bearings, and they were like, I can't find anything, everything's fine. I'm like, well, I'm going crazy, right? Like, that's just the short of it. So all I had to go off of was a humming sound that I thought was my tires, and like this sticking feeling that felt like my brake pads were sticking. And so, yeah, I drove 3,000 miles back to Washington. I got this same kind of sticking, wobbly feeling again when my wife and I were on our way back from a camping trip, and I was like, all right, it's not the brakes, has to be the wheel bearings. It's the only thing that hasn't been replaced in the front end. I had my brother out, we pulled them apart, and sure enough, it was the passenger side was like grinding, sticking. And it's really interesting because I had checked the wheel bearings. You know, like I had taken a pry bar, raised the truck in the air, put the pry bar like under the tire and lifted. I guess I was surprised because I was like, oh, my steering's gonna feel loose. You know, I'm gonna be all over the road, I'm gonna get weird tire wear, and I had none of those symptoms. So maybe it was just that I noticed it super early on, and that was what was causing the truck to kind of lurch and stick and basically not roll consistently. But again, I get my truck inspected, you know, I check it every month. I'll go around and pry on joints and like look at the front end, and there was no play in the wheel and tire. And I think part of that's probably because, you know, it's a heavy duty bearing. It's not gonna move if you pry on it. It needs like way more force. And so really it was just the sticking and then the whirring sound but I mistook the whirring sound for the tires. So if you have either of those symptoms, like kind of a sticking, you know, it almost feels like your brakes are on when you're trying to drive, so you have to give it more revs, or like a really loud whirring sound, almost like cupped tires is what it sounds like. It could be your wheel bearing. And again, I was expecting the symptoms to be a lot more aggressive, for lack of a better term. Like I was like, oh, it'll be super obvious, the thing's gonna be screeching, you know, it'll be wobbling. And I did have some front end wobble, but I've kind of isolated that to being the fact that the KO3s balance like shit. Yeah, if you have either of those issues in your front end and, you know, you haven't done your bearings for a while, it's probably your front wheel bearing. But all that to say that if you're prying on it with a bar or shaking the front wheel with the truck in the air, it's probably not gonna show the fact that the bearing is failed, just because of how rugged these front things are. And I mean, I kind of was thinking about it, I was like, huh, like 215, like that's a long time. You know, bearing's 6 years old, truck was built in, 2019, it's now 2025. So they were definitely overdue, and you know, I'm like, oh, but like, why did the bearing go? And then I was thinking about like the off-road park I've taken this thing to, and just like how many miles it has on it over the years, and I'm like, all right, yeah, I was overdue. Like it was making the whirring sound like 15,000 miles ago, but I think that's pretty good. I don't know, let me know in the comments below if you think 215,000 is good out of a set of these front, you know, bearing assemblies. I went with Motorcraft again. They were heinously expensive. It was $600 per assembly. So I spent 1,200 bucks to get new bearings. But the way I look at it, I think Ford, for once, built a good part with these front carrier bearings. Like they're solid. Even though they were more expensive than Timken, it seemed like in the forums, the people that were running Timken had said that they like failed earlier than the Motorcraft. And so I was like, I'm just gonna go with what's worked. Normally I hate replacing Ford parts with Ford parts, but in this case, it made sense. Thanks for watching this video. If you've had to replace your wheel bearings on your Lumaduty or 6.7, let me know in the comments below, what mileage did you get out of that front bearing set before you needed to replace it?